Okay, thanks, Relay, and good morning, everyone. I am Shuyu. Join me today is Breck. So as younger professionals dedicated to the Chesapeake Bay, we both are beyond excited to be moderating today's panel discussion. And we are here to chatting about Chesapeake Bay restorations through the eyes of the next generation. So to get things started, let's have a show of hands. I'm wondering how many of you sitting here considering yourself at the early stage of your career, please show me your hands. Don't be shy. Great. Nice. There may be job out here. So I hope this panel could be a platform for you guys to share your fresh voice, to highlight your contribution, and maybe to seek advice for early career development, especially in the context of the Chesapeake Bay. And then for those who consider yourself at the mature stage of your career, I want to hear some loud applause. You guys made it through. You guys deserve it. Whoa. Okay. And I also noticed someone didn't have a reaction, but no matter where stage you are at, this panel discussion will be fun. Okay, so we have got a lot of insights and interesting questions to be packed into this 1 hour and 15 minutes panel discussion. And we will also leave time for audience to ask questions. So please get your questions ready and we will make sure to weave them into the discussion. Okay, let me start introduce our panelists. So we have our first panelist, Dr. Jessie Turner. She's currently a postdoc fellow at the University of Connecticut, and happened to talk with Jessie yesterday. She just got a faculty position and she will be returning back to the Chesapeake. So welcome and congratulations, Jessie. And we have our second panelist, Nicole. She's currently a Water Quality ORISE Fellow, postdoc fellow at the EPA Region 3 with the Chesapeake Bay Program Office. Welcome. And then we have Nick Coleman. Thanks. And we have our third panelist, Nick Coleman. He is a biologist at the NOAA Southeast Science Center in Florida. And welcome.
Our next panelist is Wuillam Urvina. He is with CRC, Chesapeake Research Consortium, Environmental Management Staffer position within the Chesapeake Bay program. We then have Kelsi Furman. She's a postdoc at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. And last but not least, we have Shane Mizelle with USGS. Go USGS.
So I think, as Riley mentioned, this is the first plenary panel discussion organized and hosted and presented by all the younger professionals. So please join me giving them the warmest, another round of warmest welcome. Okay, so let's get into those questions. So our panelists, they have just learned where you are today, but they are also interested in knowing your evolution of your career trajectory, and especially your story with the Chesapeake Bay. Like, how did your professional career get intervened with the Bay program? Jessie, want to start it?
I'll start. So I, in undergrad, thought I was going to be a foreign languages major. That didn't work out. I changed my mind and did an internship measuring the pH of mud in clam flats in Maine and thought, oh my gosh, you can put a number on nature and explain the story, and wanted to do that for my job. Went to Alaska, did my master's there, and met my now husband, who got a dream job in Virginia on the Chesapeake Bay. So I definitely kind of wanted to stay with my family and made that sort of a priority. And with that, I fell in love with the Chesapeake Bay after living there, doing my PhD at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, VIMS. I wanted to stay in the area and was able to do a remote postdoc, which I'm still doing, so a little flexibility. And now I'll be starting at Old Dominion University ODU next year. So returning to the Bay and continuing my Chesapeake Bay research program. So that's sort of my trajectory. Thanks.
So I'll follow the pattern of Jessie. So initially I thought I'm going to the law school, but then I changed my mind in middle school, and I figured out programming was my best subject in college. So I decided I'm going to be a modeler. I became a modeler before graduation at Bay program, and now I'm an incoming next postdoc fellow at Yale. So I'm going out of Chesapeake Bay to a larger extent of the U.S. East Coast, and I'm very excited about conduct the linkage between the different water bodies along this region.
Yes, I'm a proud son of Maryland. So I grew up running around the Chesapeake Bay with a dip net and identified that I had a passion for environmental science at an early age. And I wanted to pursue that passion at Coastal Carolina, where I studied marine science and got introduced to fisheries and kind of found a passion in migratory fish behavior, and especially anadromous fish. I've kind of emulated that in my career because I'm from Maryland and went away to school for undergrad and then came back home for my master's. So I kind of took a page out of their book. And yeah, I came back to the University of Maryland to do a master's with Dave Secor on sturgeon, and just doing NOAA network, ended up at NOAA, where I just started a position in the Southeast Fisheries Science Center working on offshore wind spatial planning.
So for my story, it's a little, not that much different, but I got interested in the environmental field from high school because of AP Environmental Science. Shout out to my teacher, she was great. And then after that, I decided to go into environmental engineering as my undergrad major, but my advisor did a good job of convincing me, no, go into environmental science, it's less math. She lied, there was more math. But after that, I realized I really wanted to go into environmental science. I got to get a C-stream internship with the Chesapeake Bay program and worked with water quality. I got to be exposed to a lot of different data, and I got to learn some programming, which was cool. And then I don't know if you guys know, but something called the pandemic happened. So after that, I had to do a virtual internship, but I got to do it again with C-stream, this time with the diversity work group. And I got to work with local stakeholders and kind of do an analysis for the Bay program. So my perspective is coming more from that kind of intersection between people and the environment, which kind of got reinforced later when I became an environmental management staffer at the Bay program once again, working with the diversity work group, protected lands work group, and public access.
So I kind of similar to follow up on you. So I'm from Vermont originally, and I've always been really interested in understanding environmental attitudes and values and what motivates people to care about the environment. So I went to Northeastern University for my undergraduate degree in environmental science. And there I really learned about environmental sociology and environmental justice issues. And that's what I really became passionate about. I did an undergrad internship. Northeastern is known for their co-op program at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And there I studied harmful algal blooms, which was an amazing experience, but I spent 8 hours every day looking at a microscope. And so when I learned about environmental sociology and justice work and that you could get paid to talk to people, I was like, that sounds great. I love to talk to people. So let's do that instead. And there I connected with my then PhD advisor, and we really built a great personal and professional relationship. And so I had heard that that was really vital to understand if you're going to collaborate well with your PhD advisor, and that will make you more successful during your PhD. So I ended up staying at Northeastern for my PhD. And from there, I was given the opportunity to go to NOAA Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Juneau, Alaska for my postdoc. And I thought that's a really great opportunity to expand my network, build new collaborators. I think that's a really important part of a postdoc experience, is learning new experiences, new study system, and building your network. So I went to Juneau for a year and then drove all the way there from New England and then drove all the way here to Maryland, where I'm now a postdoc at the Smithsonian. And part of this project is a case study for the Chesapeake Bay, as well as a case study in the Gulf of Mexico and a case study in Puget Sound. So again, using this postdoc to learn new study systems, build new skill sets, and expand my network and collaborations.
Morning, everyone. So when I got out of high school, I really wasn't sure at all what I was going to do in college. I still had illusions of playing professional baseball, like a lot of young athletes. So I was kind of on the back burner what I wanted to do with my career. My mom's a successful nurse, and she had kind of always been in my ear about maybe being a physician's assistant, something like that. So when I started school, I was playing baseball, and I'm like, I'll just take the classes as if I'm going to be a PA. So that meant taking an undergrad in a biological science, chemistry, bio. So I started with bio, but still just, focused on trying to be a baseball player. Well, I soon noticed that it was going to be really hard to keep up with the demands of, getting the hours for PA school, taking the classes and baseball. And I think it was in my sophomore year, I took an intro ecology and evolution class. And there was just a ton of labs, and it was like everything that we were doing in class was like, man, like I really, really like this. This is all the stuff that I liked when I was younger, It's like I grew up a dinosaur kid, falling asleep, being serenaded by David Attenborough, that kind of thing. So I was like, you know what? I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to go with this, but let's just stay down this bio route and kind of see where that takes us. And so after the baseball thing fell through, transferred to Towson. And in my first year at Towson, I met somebody who actually was working at the USGS in one of my classes. Became really good buddies with him, started working on some undergraduate research stuff. We'd come across USGS data all the time, practically in everything that we did. And as luck would have it, I think my senior year, a position opened up as like a hydrologic technician assistant at USGS. And I took that job, and I soon realized that, USGS would give me the opportunity to do pretty much anything that I wanted to. And like I grew up on the Bay, I grew up in Dundalk. So it's like Back River, and always hearing about, the pollution and everything surrounding my community. It seemed like the perfect way to, kind of give back. And it's been a good ride so far. So.
Thank you all so much. I think we definitely heard the importance of youth education in the environmental studies, just making sure that we can get young kids out in the environment so they know what's possible when they grow up. And also, it's great to hear the nonlinear stories. Very comforting to know I'm not the only one out there. So thank you. For our next question, we'd like you to share a highlight from your recent work or past research contributing to the understanding and improving the health of the Chesapeake Bay. We'll start on the other end.
All right. So I routinely collect discrete water quality samples on the Susquehanna and the Potomac River, including the continuous monitoring of Potomac at Little Falls that I'm in charge of the operation and data analysis for. So just generally speaking, I'm consistently collecting data and, helping people build models for the two most important, inputs to the Bay. Also recently finished phase 2 of a toxic contaminant study where we were looking at metals, PCBs, pesticides in regards to sediment concentrations in the Anacostia River. Besides that, I also recently helped develop some new standard microplastic sampling techniques. I'm getting involved with a lot of 6-ppdq. I really like the emerging contaminants. So I like the ability to build new sampling techniques and procedures and being on the cutting edge of that.
So very different as an environmental sociologist. So recently I just completed my Chesapeake Bay case study for my project here at the Smithsonian. And really the high level goal of my postdoctoral project here is to understand what local key aspects of marine and coastal biodiversity local community members value and rely on for different services. And then to understand if marine resource managers are thinking about those same aspects of local biodiversity when they're making their decisions, and understand if academics and researchers are prioritizing prioritizing those components of biodiversity when they're, addressing new research questions and building out new projects. And so one thing that we recently did is we convened a workshop of these different types of stakeholders, experts, and community members together at the Smithsonian, where we had the opportunity to convene these groups to discuss these different components of biodiversity and see where things align or see where there are knowledge gaps or future management approaches that are needed to better manage biodiversity for these community members to ensure that they have access to the biodiversity that they care about. And so that was a really amazing experience to hear all these different perspectives, bring everyone in a room together, and to start building a framework for a decision support tool to better motivate practical and equitable management in the future.
Kind of from, I guess, a similar perspective, when we think about the health of the bay, we generally think about the ecological health of the bay or the physical, but we don't really think about the health of the communities around the bay, which are still an integral part of that system. And so during my time with the Chesapeake Bay program, during my second internship at C-Stream, I was part of a project that looked at kind of the local stakeholders and how involved they were with the Bay program, and taking a look at all of the organizations, countless spreadsheets, and looking at the membership of these different work groups, you get to see that there was an overrepresentation of federal and state representatives and very low local engagement. And there was even less because there was a focus, since I was working with the diversity group, there was a focus with looking at organizations also led by people of color or that served people of color primarily. And that was even lower than the local groups as well. And so to kind of tie that into some previous research that's been done by the public access work group at the Bay program. And if you get a chance, you should check out the report, chesapeakebayprogram.net. There's an overwhelming amount of connection to the bay if they have access to the bay, but there's also an overwhelming connection to the bay if they're near the bay. And a lot of times when we think of, oh, we need to get people on the bay or connected to the bay, we think of we need to get them on the water. But this project and this research, which was called the Benefits and Barriers Research Project, Scope 11, showed that around 1/3 of visitors who are not as frequent to the bay feel connected just by being near it. And this generally corresponded with people who were less affluent, people who didn't identify as white, or people who didn't have as much public access in their communities. And so that kind of just ties into the idea of really connecting the people to the bay in different ways than we've thought of, and looking at the health of the bay from a different perspective.
So for my master's, I had the privilege of working with Dave Secor to estimate the abundance of Atlantic sturgeon in the Nanticoke River, which is a tributary of the Chesapeake Bay on the eastern shore. And for those of you that aren't aware, Atlantic sturgeon were historically abundant in the Chesapeake Bay, but due to historic overfishing and habitat loss are currently listed as an endangered species. And the Nanticoke River hosts one of the only known spawning runs of Atlantic sturgeon in Maryland. So establishing baseline abundance estimates for sturgeon were important in their recovery plan and their process. And we used acoustic telemetry and sonic imagery to create this really cool model to use individual movement data and census data from kind of a choke point where we knew the fish were moving through to generate these estimates of abundance. And it was really cool because those estimates of abundance came full circle. So I finished my thesis in November of 2022. And around the same time, there was interest in developing a salmon aquaculture facility in an area that was critical habitat for salmon or for sturgeon. So we actually used the preliminary results from my research to provide scientific advice against developing this aquaculture facility because it would have potentially negatively influenced this important spawning ground for sturgeon. It was really cool to see it come full circle and keep rooting for the sturgeon.
So half of my PhD dissertation are leading to the next generation model, which is on the development of bay scaling. So in these two chapters, basically we are emphasizing the importance of a more realistic representation of the geometry, specifically the bathymetry, how important it is to a better simulation and therefore a better management tool for decision making for the Chesapeake Bay. And we also use this model to do to have a prediction on the bay hypoxia and the sea level rise. We analyzed each budget of the oxygen dynamics from both physical and biogeochemical sides. We emphasize the importance of enlarged bay volume and enhanced bay circulation leads to the increase of bay hypoxia in the sea level rise condition. And we also predict the phytoplankton production is going to increase under this condition because increased availability of light, but unfortunately, this also leads to more organic consumptions of DO, which is not a good choice for the oxygen consideration.
Great. So one thing I think I heard there is, and one thing I've heard throughout this conference is sometimes the management actions taken to improve the Chesapeake Bay might have these unintended consequences or sort of secondary consequences that I find that really interesting. So I'll go with past work as well. One thing I looked at was water clarity in the Chesapeake Bay. How clear is the water? And we saw this really strange thing, which is that over time, the light attenuation was showing improving water clarity, but the Secchi depth was showing the water getting less clear, more turbid. And that just didn't make sense. So we wanted to look at why that was. And so we also used a model, different model from Nicole, and wanted to see what reducing the sediment input would do to the Chesapeake Bay. So we did kind of an extreme case of what if the Chesapeake Bay were fully armored with less sediment coming in? What does that do to water clarity? Well, it turns out when you decrease the sediment coming into the system, you're actually allowing for more light for the primary production and the production of organic matter. And that organic matter can be very fine and interact with light in a way that you might not expect. And Secchi disk depth is more sensitive to that. So decreasing the sediment inputs actually made for more organic matter and a shallower Secchi depth, but still enough light could penetrate to depth. So kind of explain this counterintuitive thing that we were seeing in the data. And I found that to be really interesting. And it just highlights that maybe nutrients and sediments are different things, and we should think about them differently in the context of the Chesapeake Bay. So that's sort of something that I really enjoyed doing in my past research for the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, thanks for you guys for sharing your exciting work for the Chesapeake Bay. Believe it or not, so even though we are here sitting coherently to work on the panel discussion, most of us have never seen each other. So it's really exciting and impressive to hear you guys working together towards the Chesapeake Bay from different perspectives in different horizons, from a data perspective, from modeling perspective, from people perspective, to get different community get involved into the Chesapeake Bay, from biology to ecology. It's really exciting. So for the third question, circle back to your nonlinear or to your professional career. So as early career, we often found ourselves are standing at the crossroad where we are supposed to make very important decisions, but sometimes the GPS or Google Map didn't work. So, so my question is, so what were your major decision points, and how did you guys navigate that? And anyone feel free to jump in.
Anybody feel strongly? Okay, I'll start again and we'll go down.
Okay.
So a couple of my decision points were in undergrad, whether to go to grad school and where to go to grad school. And at the time I was, quite young. And so I went for the risky option, which was to go to Alaska. And that turned out to be a good choice. And then my other sort of decision point was whether to continue on to do a PhD, because I actually know a lot of people, and maybe you do too, who are very successful researchers or very successful in other jobs, and they didn't need a PhD at all to do their work. And so that's not, necessarily something you need to do unless you want to run a lab or teach at the college level. And so that was actually a really hard decision for me. So if you want to talk about that later, feel free. But I decided I did want to have some autonomy in the kind of research that I did, and I did want to teach at the college level or graduate student level. So I decided, yes, I do want to do that. So overall, it worked out, but I get that that's actually a pretty big choice, and you don't necessarily need a PhD to be a successful scientist. And then throughout it all, I'm not afraid to say I wanted to do what's best for my family as well. And that's important in being a good contributor to your profession, is to be happy in your personal life and have a good family life. So I really tried to stay in the Chesapeake Bay area, not just because I like it, but because I wanted to live in the same place as my family. So.
I think my decision making is very practical based. So when I decide my major, I basically follow the list of what subject I'm best at. So the list is computer, math, physics, and then in the end biology. So I did not do biology. I started to do physical oceanography. Then I think I can be happily a modeler, just looking at the code and don't think about other things and making money. Hopefully go to the industry. Then I realized, okay, I value academic freedom more than how much money I made. So I've been trying to come back to academia.
Yeah, so my decisions, I guess, crossroads in my career also center around grad school. The first one was when to go to grad school. So I've done outreach with a lot of undergraduate students, and one of the most common questions that they ask is, how do you feel at the time of going to grad school, or when do you know what's right to go to grad school? And obviously it's going to be very different for every person. And in my experience, I went straight through. So I actually graduated from undergrad in December of 2019, and I started grad school in January 2020. So I think there was about 2 weeks in between my graduation and the start of my next program. But that was never my initial intent. I thought I was going to take a year off in between to kind of gain some competency as a professional and kind of tailor my research interests. But that decision was ultimately made to go straight through because the research opportunity that was presented to me was too good to pass up. So using your networks is always an important way to kind of leverage decisions. And I also consulted all of my mentors, and yeah, having a community of mentors is really important. We can talk about that later, but that's something I really strongly emphasize for anybody in young professionals. And when I finished my master's, I realized that I've been working with an endangered species and felt like I had a really good research background and that was competent with the research I wanted to do, but I had no idea about the management and policy side. So I kind of took a detour and decided that I wanted to get some management and policy background. So I applied for a job to be an environmental policy analyst in the Office of Sustainable Fisheries in Silver Spring, and working to infuse climate change into fisheries management. So a complete 180 from my very strong research background. There were no sturgeon, there were no fish to touch. There was a lot of legislation and documents to sort through. But I learned a lot from it. I ultimately grew as a scientist, and I gained a better appreciation for policy and managers. So I like to think that if I had environmental science glasses on, one of my lenses is definitely research, but I kind of gained a little bit of a policy and management lens as well. And I think that's really important to help facilitate conversations and ultimately meeting goals between policy managers and researchers, because sometimes we don't talk as much as we should.
So interesting enough, I kind of had the opposite story where I originally planned to go into grad school right after graduating, but things didn't work out in my favor. So I kind of just worked around for a little bit. I got the opportunity to work as a bilingual ranger for the Chesapeake Conservancy in Maryland State Parks. And that kind of also introduced me into the idea of, oh, there's like a good connection between the environment and people. And then I was actually working there when I heard about the position with the CRC as an environmental management staffer. And one of the big things that kind of helped me choose that position was the development opportunities. I think that, I don't know for the rest of the early career professionals out there, but getting professional development opportunities can be hard, right? So that opportunity for me really kind of made the position attractive in a sense or desirable. And then recently I've actually come across another opportunity where I'm transitioning into a new position, literally starting on Monday. So wish me luck. Oh, thank you. But I'm transitioning into a position with the Choose Clean Water Coalition as an equity and outreach specialist. And one of the reasons why I decided to make that big decision was because of the flexibility. They offered me an example of like what work mode I wanted to do, whether I wanted to do virtual, in-person, or hybrid. They offered professional development. And these are some of the things that really helped me navigate those big decisions in my career.
Yeah, so I think before I go, just hearing everyone else talk, I think it's important to say that everyone has different paths and things work out for different people. And a lot of it, like you just said, is like what presents itself at that moment in time. And that's a similar experience for me. I'm a first generation college student, so I had no idea about grad school, and that was never on my radar. I went to undergrad and just thought I would see where it took me. And I was lucky during my undergrad to find a great mentor. And so I think, like everyone has said, like finding good mentorship is so important. And I kind of ended up being at the right place at the right time, that my then PhD advisor had been a postdoc in Northeastern and then was a research associate, and then received a tenure track position while I was in a gap year in between my undergraduate and grad school. And so then it presented this amazing opportunity to continue on to my PhD with him as he was starting up his lab. And for me, I don't have a master's. And so one thing I had heard is, if you're, as everyone else has said, if you're unsure about grad school, to not do it until you're sure about grad school. And so I had an opportunity to work as my future advisor's research technician for a year in between. And that really allowed me to ensure that we had a great relationship and that I was really interested and passionate about the research that he was doing. And so that really set me up for success for grad school. And then, like I already mentioned, I think another big decision point for me was making the big move to Alaska for my postdoc. One thing I had heard when I was deciding for grad school was that it was risky and I was potentially putting myself at a disadvantage for staying at the same university for my PhD that I was at for my bachelor's, because the first 10 years of my CV is all Northeastern University. And that ended up working out really well for me. Like I said, it was great because I already had a great relationship with my PhD advisor, and then also the professors that ended up being my committee members and my other mentors. But it was really important to me to make a big move and explore new connections and collaborations for my postdoc. So I would also highly recommend diversifying your portfolio and taking this early career stage as an opportunity to build your network.
As a lot of the other panelists, my biggest decision point was also surrounding grad school, beside the shift from wanting to be a PA to environmental science. But
So you're gonna say baseball player.
yeah. So my grad school obstacles were maybe slightly different. I was in a committed relationship with my now fiance. We get married next year. Yeah. And we knew all along that her route would require, graduate school, PhD type thing because of what she was doing. So I finished undergrad a little bit before her, and working the new job at USGS, I was working another job and trying to keep my relationship happy. I felt that it might not be the best time for both of us to undergo that at the same time. Also, additionally, I wasn't 100% sure what program would best suit me. So I thought that, working a few years at USGS might point me in the right direction. And so I haven't yet gone back to grad school, but I do feel that now when I do apply and go back, I have a much clearer picture of like what I want to go for. And not only that, there have been many people at USGS that have like served as great mentors to make me feel like I'm really ready to do something like that and give me experiences that probably would have been similar to, going to grad school anyway. So I'm very appreciative of that.
So you guys have sort of mentioned, for example, a shift of position or or a career mentor, or coordinating with your family, happy wife, happy life. Those are very helpful for our career development. So that brought up our next question. So we wonder if what advice or what additional advice do you have for our early career professionals? I know maybe you guys are still sort of, seeking out the suggestions, but any suggestions for our early career professionals?
I guess my advice would just be, don't be afraid to get involved in things that might not be exactly what, you had as your specific interest in mind, because a lot of times just making these connections and going down these roads just gives you new outlets and ways to connect, whatever it is that, that project is on with what you ultimately want to do. I would say that the first couple things that I worked on might not necessarily have been like 100%, this is what I want to focus on forever, but it has enabled me to, see those paths on how to get there. So I would just say, keep those things in mind in the back of your head, but don't turn down any opportunity because it may indirectly lead you there anyway.
Yeah, I can follow up on that. That I think when I first started my undergrad, I had no idea what career path environmental science could take me to. And so I think understanding all of the different career avenues and what education and experience you need to get to where you want to go is really important. And I think taking time in your undergrad, and then if you have a gap year and even masters, to explore those different avenues, different research is really important.
I would also say the same thing. I think it's just as important to know what you like versus what you don't like. For example, I learned very early in my career that I didn't like programming. That's something that I wasn't really interested in. But then I also learned that I did enjoy, for example, I still enjoyed research, just that aspect of it wasn't for me. But to kind of add some other advice to the pool, I would say that for early career professionals, I would give the advice to network. It's really important that you either, like a lot of the other panelists have said, like have a mentor, build a relationship, have a connection, because you'll be surprised how many of the same faces you see once you get into the Chesapeake Bay workforce. I'm pretty sure I've seen a lot of faces already, but that's something that can help open a lot of doors, and they might not get you in the door, but at least they're more open for you. And that's something that, all of us want, right? We want the next generation to come in and kind of have the opportunity. So that would be my advice.
I'm so sorry to be redundant, but some of the best advice that I ever got was don't turn down any professional opportunity that's given to you, because you never know where it's going to lead to. And it's also going to help you kind of narrow down your interest and tailor what you want your career path to look like. So that being said, the fourth time, maybe anybody interested should write that down. But in addition to that, I think it's also important not to rush. You've heard that from the panelists up here that a lot of the paths aren't linear, or they don't work out the way that you might hope they do originally. But there's a sense of gratitude that you can gain from taking your time to really put intention and thought into what you want to do with your career. And that might take time, and you might hope that you have it all figured out, the next day, but that never happens. And I'm sure all of our mature scientists can speak to that even more. So yeah, taking your time and not feel like you have to rush, or you're looking over your shoulder to see what other people are like. It's everybody has their own different career path.
I think I have a few points, but the first one is to have self-reflections and make self-evaluations as objective as possible, because the feedbacks you receive from your external environment could have bias. It could be really good, but not as constructive as it should be, or it could be negative, but you are supposed to be the one, you judge your feelings, and you are on your path to your goals. And I think that's really important to deal with and maintain mental health. The second one I think that's really important is to have strategic priorities, because everyone's energy, everyone's time is very limiting at some point. So people have to make choices, and different choices can lead to different results. To have a preview of this could be really helpful. And the third thing I think it's really important is working hard to, when you look back, you feel proud of yourself and you don't regret because you did not miss any opportunities, any limited opportunities I faced. So I think these are my opinions.
Thanks, that's helpful. I'd like to add something Shane said this morning is that I've heard some good advice, but we are all still seeking advice also. So if you are a more advanced person in your career, and when we get to the greater discussion, if you find something that we've all missed that's really important, please contribute. But in the meantime, I had 2 points, and one is it's never too early in your career to act like the role that you want. So if you're in the midst of grad school, like very focused on this question, but you know you eventually want to, I don't know, work in industry or something, you can consider your future self and just try to act like that person, and it'll kind of help you maintain a more positive attitude, I think. And then the other thing is, and a couple of folks have said it already, is if you're choosing between things and one of them seems really crazy and risky and fun, do that one. Do the crazy thing, because especially if you know it's also going to be good for your career, but you're unsure and it sounds a little risky, usually you will not regret that. So do the crazy thing is what I would say. Thanks.
Thank you all. I really appreciate that advice, but I think even if you're mid or late career, you know, there's always room to keep learning. Also, thank you for your statements on mentors. Some of mine are in this room right now. But even if you don't see yourself as a mentor, young professionals are always looking up to you, always looking to see what you're doing, how you're reacting to things. So there's always ways for you to make an impression. So I do want to note this is going to be our last question that we have for the panel, and then we're going to open it up for the audience. So if you were able to attend yesterday in the morning, there was a presentation by Anna Amartha on Beyond 2025. So the reevaluation that the Chesapeake Bay program is doing for our goals and outcomes in the future. So the question that we have for our panelists is, what do you see as the priorities for the Bay and its watershed for Beyond 2025? And how do you think the Chesapeake Bay Program partnership as a whole, or individual entities such as federal, academics, nonprofit, can support a growing diverse workforce to support this path?
So I'll speak from the academic perspective, and my personal opinion. There are things that are happening in institutions, some institutions more than others, that are barriers to success. So if you see those things, it's a good time to speak up and keep those from happening. One example is I've heard that some data science, business, econ, and math courses are now being charged extra fees to take those courses. And that sounds like a very much a barrier for folks who may have trouble printing, things like that. So if you find things like that are coming up in your institution, please act against that as much as you can. Another thing that I see from my perspective is there's not going to be less data. There's only going to be more data and more model output happening. And so computing may become a challenge, or it may become cost prohibitive for people at underfunded institutions. Some of us are lucky enough to be at institutions, and myself included, where we have access to high performance computing, or for the satellite data people, you may have access to cloud computing as the satellite data moves to the cloud. But some folks at underfunded institutions or nonprofits or just smaller colleges and things, they may not have a mechanism in place to pay for cloud computing or high performance computing. And just to make sure we have either collaborations in place where those people could work with somebody at a larger institution or a larger university to make sure their work can get done and that those people are not left out. I think that'll become really important as we go. You know, we're not going backwards. We're only getting more data and more computing. So just keep that in mind. And then my other thing that I always say is, we need to make use of all the data as the data sets are growing in size and growing in the amount. So we're only launching more satellites or putting up more buoys or putting out more time series data. And we need to make sure people are using it. And so part of my mission is to train the next generation of data users to make sure we get the most discovery per our investment, or the most bang for our buck scientifically out of all that data. So that's my 2 words on that.
Talking about beyond 2025, I I've already heard exciting works conduct to collect data beyond the old water quality parameters that we care about. People are collecting data for microplastics, and I think it would be great if we can have an extension on different parameters. Go beyond SAV, go beyond oxygen towards carbon and PFAS chemicals, these kind of things. And secondly, talking about the data use and data generation, I think to lower the bar of information getting is not only about the cost. If there's support of getting the feed to this information, that's great. Another thing to lower the bar is lower the learning curve. For example, if you go to the website of Chesapeake Bay or go to the website of NOAA, you can easily download one piece of data, plot there, that's great. But for your scientific research, you might need a lot of data and you need to write some scripts. It's not crazy for experienced users, but for those newcomers, it's really, it's a headache. And I think it will be great if we can put some samples there to let them starting from some point, getting a walkaway or step by step, how these loops are going to be used. And besides that, the principles of how to getting this kind of information is important to describe and educate it. These are my 2 points.
Yeah, before I comment on how we can continue to improve, I do want to take a second to acknowledge the fact that I think this region does a phenomenal job of outreach for students. Like, as a panelist, can I say give a round of applause for the Chesapeake Bay and this group? I am a product of the Chesapeake Bay's outreach and mentorship. I was a C-Stream intern for 2 years. I did my internships at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And those experiences were formative in my foundation and an identity as a scientist. So I think first and foremost, continuing on the path that we are currently on with encouraging outreach and access to diverse groups is incredibly important for our success going forward beyond 2025. For continuing to build upon that, I think as an early career professional that was recently looking for jobs, I think one of the things that was a little difficult was the jobs ads, solicitations. I frequently found that for entry-level positions and for early career staff, I saw that they were looking for, graduate experience and, 2 to 5 years of work experience, which can be difficult for early career scientists because you're trying to navigate those paths and they become highly competitive with other people that may not be as early career as you. So it's kind of be confusing in those solicitations for early career scientists when you're kind of navigating and you might not have that experience. So I think thoughtfulness in how we recruit students and having positions that are specifically tailored to early career scientists is important so that they can grow with the position. I think that's really interesting. My current position at NOAA is one specifically geared for recent graduates, and it allows for the person that is hired to grow with that position. As we all know, our positions change with research priorities and everything, and I think that's a really unique aspect that can really help encourage new thoughts and ideas from some of the early career professionals coming behind some of the great work that you all have done.
So I would like to apologize to the Chesapeake Bay program colleagues because they might hear some of the same points I've said before. But in terms of the priorities I see for beyond 2025, I would say that one is understanding that with climate change, a lot of what we see in the future is going to change and that we need a multidisciplinary approach to kind of address that problem, and not just within the environmental field, but in general. Climate change will affect everything from water quality to landscape architecture to even immigration with like environmental refugees. So understanding that working within silos isn't going to work anymore is something that we need to acknowledge and focus on beyond 2025. I would also say that centering people in our decision-making is an important aspect. While I 100% agree, and I'm a firm believer in 2 things can be true at once, that we need data to support our decisions and inform our decisions, we should also take into consideration centering people, because it's people who are going to take care of the bay. It's people who are going to work and recreate and play on the bay. So having them involved in that process is very important in terms of priorities for beyond 2025. Now, in terms of how we can support a growing and diverse workforce, like the question states, we have a diverse workforce already. So in order to support them, we should, specifically for the Bay Program Partnership and its partners, we should really consider being very focused in our efforts to implement and integrate diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility. DEIJA is important. All of those concepts are equally important, but they're also all different. They're not one umbrella term, and they all require different methods, different ways in order to implement. We already have a diverse workforce, but are we making the space inclusive for them? Are we making those positions accessible? Are we being equitable in our decision-making and how we're distributing that power, that influence? I think those are really important things to consider if we want to make sure that the Bay gets saved, or like we continue to work towards doing that.
You took my answer. No, but just to add to that in terms of like beyond 2025 and the future of Chesapeake Bay research and management, one thing that we heard a lot in our recent workshop is the need for interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research and for collaboration regionally and across sectors in the Chesapeake Bay region. So we heard a lot about unintended consequences of management approaches right now, and that some of those unintended consequences are often preventing access in an inequitable way. And so making sure that everyone is at the table who is impacted by those decisions and understanding what the trade-offs are of different management interventions that are on the table and who might lose access, and are those people those who have historically lost access or been underrepresented in making those decisions. And especially when thinking about climate change, like you mentioned, we're seeing range shifts, distribution shifts, we're seeing invasive species. So understanding if there's opportunity there in increasing adaptive capacity. And one of the core issues that we hear time and time again is that management can't keep up with the changes. And so finding ways to make management more flexible if possible to allow adaptation and increase adaptive capacity, whether that's, having new fisheries with these new species coming into the Bay, whatever that may be, to try to ensure access for livelihoods and other ecosystem services in the future.
So I'm just gonna wrap up the question with a very USGS answer. And I think that it's just overall data collection being super, super important. Just seems the more data we have, regardless of the topic, it makes the decision-making easier, the picture clear, and, makes best management practices, become more apparent, I guess. So above all, just continuing to collect data and data. So, yeah.
Thank you all. And as someone who's partaking in Beyond 2025, we'll definitely take those recommendations to heart. But we can now open it up to the audience. If you have any questions or advice to give to early career professionals.
I have a remote question.
Excuse me?
One of our remote
Oh, yes, please.
Two-part. What piece of advice do you have for mature scientists to be better mentors? And what is one piece of advice you have for young professionals to be better mentees?
That wasn't in the questions they gave us.
Maybe as far as experienced scientists to be better mentors, just, not forgetting that you were once in the shoes of the younger professional, and that, everything that's apparent to you may not be apparent to them, and just giving them the extra time and not being, so one-track mind or, caught up in the goal of the project, and not forgetting that, someone's still trying to learn the ropes.
To kind of build off of that answer, not to make it solely focused on like a generational difference, but I would also, for mentees, I would give the advice that you should also try to be empathetic and consider where the mentors are coming from, because what might be apparent to us in terms of like, for example, like social issues or social justice issues might not be as apparent to the older generation or to mentors. So I would give that advice to the mentees as well.
And another thing for mentees is go ahead and take ownership of your work and sort of manage up, because sometimes the more senior people are very busy and have a huge list of projects, and you need to, from your perspective, be the one to take initiative and say what you need when, and go ahead and take ownership of that, and you'll do well that way.
Yeah, to your point, one of the best values I think a mentor can have is patience. I mean, yeah, having patience with your mentee as they come up to speed with things and navigate things, I think really makes a difference. And I've always benefited and appreciated mentors that have had the patience with me to take the time and help me develop. And for mentees, I also think that's a great point, that not being afraid to take the lead on things and kind of leaning into your identity as a scientist, especially if you're in a research position, leaning into that and obviously consult with your mentor, but yeah, don't be afraid to make decisions yourself and feel confident in those, be thoughtful in those.
Well, I think there are quite a few great senior scientists that I really admire. Is they put everything on their website and they share their life, share their blogs from 20 years ago towards yesterday. And I think during my free time looking at their websites making me really fruitful, and I think that's really appreciated. And from the mentee point of view, I think I used to be a follower, just follow what the mentor said, but later on I realized you should be in charge of yourself, which making yourself think of yourself as an adult and ask for things like what Jessie just mentioned to manage up. That would be really great. Another piece of feeling I recently got is it would be interesting if the mentee looking at the success and failures of those mentors, because they are not perfect too. So you can learn from their success and avoid the traps they had, and that could be useful at some point.
Any other questions?
Yeah, hi. A lot of you mentioned that it's important, you see it's important for the future to focus on that interdisciplinary collaboration. And I'm interested to hear from you as like what venues do you prefer? Like, do you prefer virtual online meetings, online forums, in-person work groups? What are the different places that you prefer to do that type of collaboration?
Could you repeat that question for the virtual audience?
So the question was, the panelists mentioned a lot on interdisciplinary importance in our work. And so asking the panelists, how do they like to participate in that? Virtual, online meetings, in person, large gatherings, small groups?
I can start with that one. I think with everything, there are trade-offs. I think a benefit of the remote setting is that you're going to get more people in the room. You might get a higher diversity of folks in the room, and it's much more cost effective. So we always hear time and time again, like, we need more funding, and it's a lot easier to get people together virtually. But in my experience running these workshops, the level of engagement that we had was just unparalleled in person. And I think especially having, some people in the room who might not be as comfortable speaking up, or other folks who are really busy. We keep hearing about how mentors are so busy. I think a lot of times people can get stuck multitasking in a virtual meeting. And so the engagement and the output that we got from these workshops that we had in person, and we didn't have hybrid, it was solely in person, was just unmatched compared to some of the virtual workshops that we've had.
Go ahead.
This is from the perspective of somebody who's in graduate school and had reaching the end of the career. But for students, graduate students and undergraduates, I think it's super important to find mentors. And in graduate school, it is not uncommon for somebody to be a few years in and feel trapped because their supervisor, their mentor, doesn't really pay the proper attention. And you can have fantastic scientists or terrible mentors. Not to be too negative, but there are great scientists that are just not good at it. And so I think it's really important to remember things don't always go according to plan. Be willing to pivot. Be willing to look for somebody else in that department because there is somebody. And every department has the type of person that I just described. And so it's important to be really clear-eyed when you're in graduate school and realize, this is about you. This is not about, how a graduate student's performance is going to enhance their mentor's career. That's backwards, but sometimes that happens. So, sorry to be.
No, but I'll add to that one thing my PhD advisor really emphasized, which was really helpful, was being really thoughtful in building out your dissertation committee and having a diversity of committee members. So I had some folks from other departments at Northeastern, and then I had some folks from other institutions. And my PhD advisor was male, and so as a female, he really encouraged that I have about half my committee be female mentors. And then I think a lot of times people don't rely on their committees as much as they could. And a lot of my committee members were very supportive and willing to meet and to be additional mentors. But you have to, like other folks have said, take the initiative to reach out to them and engage with them. And that's really up to you to lean on your other mentors in the department.
I just want to say thanks for mentioning and acknowledging the complex situation or the challenging journey of grad school. Things happen along the road, and don't be afraid of asking questions. And I saw a lot of questions, hands over here. Go ahead.
So multiple mentioned the importance of networking. I was just wondering if you had advice on how to effectively network. For example, how do we make the most of a conference like this so that we can actually expand our network?
I have one, and one is this is advice I've been given that I'll just pass on, and it might sound a little bit assertive, but every person you've talked to here, if you can get their name and then look them up later after the conference, you can send a follow-up email to every single person. And if some people in the audience, you may have been on the receiving end of this from past conferences from me, so apologies if it's a little forward. But I think it's helpful, and you can start a conversation and share the paper you were talking about with them, and then you have this list of people. Other advice I've gotten from someone is to keep a running list of people you like to talk to at conferences and find them at the next conference and the next conference and the next conference. And so, and just think of it as really fun. It's really nice to see folks here that I haven't seen in a couple of years, and it's really fun. So think of it as really fun.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I have no shame in going to your organization's page and looking you up and sending you a cold email. But I think, I think that's normal, and I think that's how people meet. And within that email, like some of the best advice, it's not mine, it's not trademarked by me, but I'm gonna pass it on, is that in that email, like keep it short and sweet, because if it's from a name that they might not recognize, they might not, take the time to read it. But some of the best advice was given to me was in the first paragraph, just kind of summarize who you are and what your research is. And then the second paragraph kind of summarize where your research aligns with that person, if you're interested in working with them, or, what brought you to the connection, and, maybe reference a paper or work that you admire by them. And I've gotten good success reaching out to people out of the blue like that. And don't hesitate to reach back out after 1 or 2 weeks. Like we've all said, and it's come up many times, people are busy, and more often than not, I've seen that people are more than willing to interact and speak with you. It's just things get busy, and their emails are usually really, really busy.
I'll just say one or two things. One is, if there's anyone in the audience who has good advice, please let us know too about networking, because I would like that.
I'm not sure that I heard this or not. I think you're very
mentors to introduce the young people to their colleagues, you know, so when you're running around conference and you have a student or a young person with you, just to make a concerted effort. Because it's not so easy for young people who don't know someone just like self-introduce, and you know, that's a little bit off-putting. So I think it's actually one of the jobs of mentors, in my view, is to make those introductions. And I think that can go a long way. And then it's up to the person to like, remember it right. All these lists are great ideas, making the list right now. So.
Well, thank you. But one thing I'll say that not in terms of networking, but that helps with communicating with people for the first time. People love talking about themselves. So if you approach it that way, you shouldn't get nervous because they'll just yap. They'll just yap and yap and yap.
Sure. Just to piggyback on the comment before about pivoting in grad school with mentors, that may also happen in your professional career after graduate school or outside of graduate school. So keep it in mind there as well. And yeah, keep an eye out for people that put in more than they take out. They are there. But my question is totally unrelated to that, and it's about when I talk to friends and peers that are non-science people about what I do. The two questions are almost always, why are crabs so expensive? And can we swim in the harbor next year? It's not what I do. But I'm curious how you relate what you do to your non-science peers and friends, and how do you make Chesapeake Bay science interesting and relevant to them?
For me, all my like outside hobbies include like fishing and doing things that are like always on the water. So it seems like my friend groups align with that. So I've become just like they're always asking questions about like fish health and numbers of stuff like that. And while that's not my expertise, at work, it's definitely something that I, know more about than them just from being around it. And so it's like, that's what I would say my relationship is with them.
It's funny that you asked that question because I was in this scenario this weekend and I was explaining what I do and somebody asked me, I'm a fisheries person, and somebody asked me, oh, so why are the orca whales hunting sharks? And I say, that's a fantastic question. I don't know, but yeah, I think it is something, and it's always nice to see people's passion and interest in the environmental science space. And sometimes their questions are, not misguided, but they're just very broad for how for the field that we're working, we work very specified. I always found that pictures help. So I always keep like pictures of research that I do, and people always get a kick out of that. And it's always a nice way to kind of segue into conversation.
Jenny?
First of all, a couple comments. One, just the breadth of this panel and the spectrum. It's just so cool to see, and what I'm hearing, it just gives me a lot of excitement and encouragement for you guys, really create what this program looks like beyond 2025. So thank you for being here. I also want to comment on, we're saying reach out there, send 10 emails, all that stuff. Great, that worked for me too. I also want to say, if you don't hear back from 8 of those people, do not be discouraged. It has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with what that person is. Maybe it was a bad day and I forgot, so yeah, don't take anything personally. It's not about you. So, and just keep going. So I have a question, we're hearing about and we're seeing from the diversity of the panel how important interdisciplinary work is. One of you mentioned science bad. When you go back to your day job, how much opportunity is there for you, or how much of a part of your work is it to connect outside your discipline? Or is your day job still pretty much like with people who do the same work that you do? It's hard to get that discipline.
So I can answer that. So for my current postdoctoral position, it's a really amazing group of interdisciplinary scientists on my team. And so I'm a social scientist, my mentor is an ecologist, my supervisor is an ecologist. And then we have a social scientist as a co-PI, we have a manager from NOAA as a co-PI, and then we have a variety of folks from USGS, from NOAA Fisheries on our broader collaborative team. And so that's been really amazing. And it's been a great learning experience for me as a postdoc, because my job is to herd cats and to get them all in a room and then to help facilitate those conversations between the different disciplines, which is challenging, but it's been a great learning experience for me. And so this is really my first time working in a setting like that. And I think there are challenges to it, but it's going really well. And I think it's been really impactful in advancing our research questions and the outputs of our project.
Okay, a quick add-on to that is that I would say my current day job as a postdoc, it really isn't very interdisciplinary, and maybe there's some work to do. I think some of the funding opportunities looking toward the future, maybe you all know more about this than I do, but it sounds like some of the funding opportunities are trending toward interdisciplinary, so it will be of benefit for us to work with people in other disciplines and write proposals with them, so that will help. And then I also think it depends on what's your research question or what's your goal. So maybe some things can still be solved by you and your close colleague that you kind of do the same thing, but a lot of the questions that are like these big picture future things do require an interdisciplinary approach. So just kind of use the method that's most appropriate for your goal.
I think that's a really good question. And I mentioned that the position that I occupy now is intentionally, specifically designed for recent graduates. And within that, one of the emphasis is working across divisions. So because as an early career scientist, there's that intentional exposure to different work in groups that I'll be interacting with. So one of the first things that my supervisor had me do was have meetings with all the different branch chiefs that I'll be working with. And I think that's unique to this type of position for early career scientists, because you are in a setting where you can learn a lot from other researchers, but also you're not the finished product yet. You're still learning and developing and figuring out how you can fit into the research of the laboratory. And I think that's a really unique aspect of some of these early career focused positions.
Well, we're at time. We want to make sure that we give you time to get coffee for the next panel. But so as we conclude today, let us make sure that everyone here in this room and our colleagues outside of it, we can move forward with the passion and commitment that we've seen here today, because we all have a role, any career, any disciplinary field that we're in this restoration. I'd like to give a thanks to Jenny and Randy for helping us set up this panel and allowing us the time to be here today at this conference. And a huge round of applause for our panel, who is a remarkable, remarkable group. You are already shaping the future of Chesapeake restoration and conservation, so thank you. Thank you, everyone.